the political lens of this is really interesting. When you look at some of the responses, I thought the UK government's response was interesting. London doesn't probably want to be seen as participating in this, choosing their words quite carefully, saying Ukraine's actions on the battlefield speaks for itself, choosing their words very carefully.
Well, nobody particularly wants to come out and own up to their missiles being used to kill Russians on Russian soil. Particularly if you're in Europe, it's very serious. The Germans are very uncomfortable, the Russians as well, the Brits as well. So no one wants to say it. The Brits have been supplying these particular missiles for the last sort of year or 18 months. For use against Russians in Crimea. That was the condition. Suddenly this week, two things. The President of the United States, outgoing Joe Biden, has unleashed the dog and said you can now hit into Russia and those North Korean troops. And so suddenly we're seeing Russia itself coming under attack.
What do you think Russia's response will be to this? Will Vladimir Putin see this as a declaration of war?
Well, clearly the Russians are very uncomfortable with this militarily. It's a big problem for them. We know Vladimir Putin has signed a new nuclear doctrine, whatever the significance of that. I mean, at the end of the day, he is the nuclear doctrine. I mean, he controls everything in Russia. But he has said that if we are attacked by a non-conventional state backed by nuclear-armed states, he's talking about the Ukraine and NATO, then we can respond with our nuclear arsenal. Russia has more nuclear warheads than any other country, even than the United States. It's uncomfortable to hear it, and we don't know whether it is bluster or who knows what's inside the mind of Vladimir Putin. Let's hope he doesn't use those.
No, absolutely. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Latin American countries are calling for a non-escalation of arms race. This is the dialogue that's now entering the fray. Do you think that's what we're beginning to see?
I think for the next 8 weeks, until the inauguration of Donald Trump, we're going to see something. It's quite dramatic already. We're seeing an escalation. And I think that the moment Donald Trump's in the White House, the whole dynamic changes because I think the Russians actually see him as stronger or more unpredictable than Joe Biden. And I think that so what might happen in the next weeks could be anything really. Both sides are just desperately manoeuvring on the battlefield to try to get that advantage to go to the negotiating table. It's like almost the last sort of efforts on the battlefield before they know that there has to be some sort of resolution. Donald Trump said, I'll solve it within 24 hours. I don't think it's going to be that simple, but he's certainly going to put a lot of pressure on Vladimir Zelensky to come to an agreement.
Well, you'd think that by looking at some of the embassy's responses that they are expecting. Well, the US embassy in Kyiv, I believe, is closing. Staff at the Irish embassy in Ukraine have been told to work from home.
That's right. The Americans closed their embassy for a day or so. They've reopened it now. Clearly there's panic going on, both on the battlefield. That's why they're getting these landmines in. These landmines, by the way, have a 4-hour to 2-week limit. The battery then runs out, so they don't kill civilians in months to come or years. There's panic on the battlefield and there's panic in Kyiv. The Americans closed their embassy, others are closing. The Americans got intelligence. They said that there was a major aerial attack coming. Now, Volodymyr Zelensky has said to the Ukrainian people in that address, be careful of panic. The Russians hacked into the Ukrainian Defence Intelligence Network and were putting out systems, putting out messages on the Ukrainian internet saying, be careful, there's a major attack coming. There's a lot of panic going on at the moment around Kyiv.